Get the fuck out of here right now. I told you I have a fucking show to do, and I cannot bend over until later. Fucking women, my goodness. Anyway, hello everyone, and welcome back to Dead Money. Sorry about that. Not that you'd ever think of leaving Dead Money. It was a big week in poker for me last week, not in terms of winning. In fact, I'm actually coming off one of the most aggravating 4-day stretches I can recall in quite a while, but we'll get to some of those hand histories in the next episode. First, I got some stories to tell of people both behaving deplorably and speaking moronically. First story goes like this. Weekday afternoon at the Win 2-5, and I saw some European faces I'd never seen before, young guys. And before I get to what one of them had to say, first I want to say this. European poker players for a time have had this ongoing reputation, and including now I'd say, of being like these really great and advanced players, but at least from what I see in the 2-5 pool, it's been at least 3 years where the more Euros I see, the less impressed I am. I'm not saying they're fish, but one after another is just nitty, and that's it. They're not incompetent, but they're not these extraterrestrial geniuses they've been painted as. And for the most part, they just seem pretty one-dimensional now. Sure, they get tougher as you move up in stakes, but so does everybody else. I mean, Americans have this massively fishy reputation, and I can understand why. Just, take a look around you. And I suppose that maybe the average European recreational player who doesn't give a shit about their results is significantly ahead of the average American who fits that profile. And I also suppose that the average European nit-reg is more competent and profitable than the average American nit-reg. But either way, don't give me any more of this, oh my god, hype. The Euros. They're so good. I've had enough of the hype. Because this isn't just a few months where I've seen this. It's a few years now that when they turn over a hand at a big showdown, they always fucking have it. And it's not because they're such super users that nobody catches them bluffing. They just don't do it. Anyway, so there's a good 4 or 5 games going. Mine started out good, but was getting progressively worse. The other tables look good, so I get on the transfer list. Eventually it comes. But as I'm racking up, one of the young Euros on my right says to me, "Oh, you are table changing?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, that looks like a sign of respect." And I just started laughing and said, "Yes, that's definitely one way to say it." And then I repeated it. Now, I've never seen this guy before, like I said, so I don't know if he's been to Vegas before or not. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not his first trip. Either way, who fucking says that? Cocky little shits. That's who. I see people table change off my game all the time, and I have no idea how much or little I have to do with it each time it happens. But I also don't care. Least of all to the level of saying anything to that person along the lines of, "Oh, you're leaving the game because you respect the fact that I'm here and you don't want to play with me." Jeez, don't hurt yourself reaching over to pat yourself on the back. And like I said, this was just another Euro playing like the ones I've just described. I know he's not a fish. I know he's probably worth something in this player pool. I'm not trying to deny him of that. So it's not that it, isn't a sign of respect. It's not that I don't respect those things. It's just more like there are clearly better games in this room, and I'm more interested in trying to get my edges there than sitting here all day watching more paint dry with a nit like you. A sign of respect. God almighty. So then I get to the new table, and on this table is a guy who had also transferred off my game a couple hours ago. And then he says to me, he's American, he says, "Game no good?" I said, "No, it was a great game. I just like to play in bad games. It's for the challenge." And some people laughed. I mean, look, call me an asshole if you want, but if you're going to ask a question like that, Don't be surprised if that's the kind of answer you get. Schmuck. All right, moving on. So now it's Friday night, still with the win. And this game ended up being fantastic, although that's not really that important right now. We have a raise to 20 from a middle position fish, and I 3-bet the button with pocket tens. The small blind cold called, and then the big blind picks up both of his cards and holds them high up in the air for the dealer to see, just blatantly flashes both of them as he's folding. Then the original raiser called the 60, so we're 3 ways. But then we all say to the dealer, hey, we got to see those cards now. And you know what this guy had? 7-4 offsuit. He couldn't just throw those cards in face down like it was nothing. Nope. I guess for some spectacular reason, he found it imperative to pick these cards up face level and expose them. And it's not like he had a friend of his nearby. He was sitting in the 2 seat. There was no one in the 1 seat at the time. So there was no one even near him for him to show his cards to. Not that there would ever be any justification for that, even if there was a fucking mariachi band right behind him. I mean, what compelled this asshole to do this? Gee, what a dramatic shame that is. Damn, I didn't get to defend my big blind with the 7-4 offsuit. Not once there's been a raise, a 3-bet, and a cold call in front of me, and the original raiser is still left to act. Otherwise, I'd be pumping my fist to get in there. And you already know what the flop was. 7-4-3, 2 spades, both players checked. I bet, and neither called. And then I said to the guy, can you not pick up your cards in the middle of a hand and show them to the whole table? And I said it rather sternly because this was such a flagrant, idiotic thing to do. And you know what he said back? He said it was an accident. I said, what do you mean it was an accident? You picked them up with your hands and you held them up like this. How was that an accident? We know that he meant showing the cards to the table was accidental, and then I just didn't persist any further. Because whenever you have to explain something to somebody that's already really obvious, they're not going to get it. If someone doesn't understand that fire is hot, then no matter what you tell them, it's not going to make them understand because it's so fucking obvious to begin with. So if they don't already know, then don't waste your time because nothing is going to make them get it. But even so, accident or not, what the fuck made him think that doing that wasn't going to risk card exposure and thus possibly heavily taint the outcome of this hand? I know this guy probably isn't someone who plays week in and week out, but holy shit. How much fucking common sense do you need to know to not do something as completely stupid and ignorant as that? You know, a little common sense goes a long way in this world, and you know why? Because common sense is relatively uncommon. So after the hand ended, I continued to make fun of him with the other 2 guys who I just played that hand with since we were on the other side of the table. But then one of them said, he's like, yeah, and he killed your action too. Because he show folded the 7-4 off, and then the flop came 7-4-3. And he decided that that killed my action. And this is without knowing what I had, by the way. But even if he did, I don't understand. How did that kill my action? I mean, you guys either had something or you didn't. And even if the exposed 7-4 off limits your chances to improve, if, say, either of you had either, 7-6 suited or 5-4, for example, you're not folding just because he showed that. I mean, that sucks, but you're not folding yet. So, I don't know. I think he was just trying to say something smart, but failed miserably at doing so. And this would not be the last senseless thing he would say. A couple other things first, though. Later on, we had this dealer, this guy who just always tilts the fuck out of me because he's just always a step behind or doing things that don't make any sense because he's not paying attention. Well, check this. I was the big blind for a hand, and I won a small pot. So the next hand, I'm posting my small blind, so I throw out the 2 blue dollar chips. I don't throw them far out in front of me at all. They're at most a couple inches past the betting line. But then he reaches over, because I'm in the 7 seat, and he just takes one of the dollars because he thought I was tipping him. And I wasn't, because the pot I just won was really small, and I don't tip on every single small pot, I win. So I had to stop him and say, no, I was just posting my small blind. Then he said, oh, and he gave it back. And it's just funny because I think a lot of people in that situation would just let him keep it at that point because they would just feel like a dick for saying, no, I wasn't tipping you. And if it was a dealer I liked, maybe I'd have done that too, but not for this fucking airhead. I just said, no, that's my small blind. And that was it. Then we just went on with our lives. So then, a little while later, a guy across the table was leaving the game, and he asked me if he could have the rack he saw on the drink table that was right next to me. And when he did this, a hand was going on. There was already a flop out there. So I just took the rack. He reached across the table, and I reached across, and we met in the middle, and I handed it to him. But then I said to the guys who were in the pot with that idiot showing his 7-4 off that both that guy and plenty of others would have just willy-nilly slid the rack across the table, messing up the hand and completely distracting everybody. Now, it's obviously not on the level of tainting a hand by exposing a card, never mind 2 cards. It's really more just making the point that in the 2-5 player pool, people are so fucking clueless as to how inconsiderate they are. So we're going to continue on with what happened on this Friday night, but first we're going to fast forward to Saturday night, and then come back. The straddle was on. Under the gun raises to 30. I was next action. I think I had pocket deuces. I called. Then I think the small blind or the button called. And then the big blind 3-bet to 130. And then the open raiser, just like the mongrel from the night before, picks up both of his cards and shows them to the guy who had just 3 bets before folding. So the dealer sees this and then turns them over. And you know what this fucking guy folded? I mean, I know I keep saying that. I know you don't know, but he folded ace-king offsuit. He opens this under the gun, gets 2 calls, and is faced with a relatively small, out-of-position 3-bet, since it was just under the pot size. You know, we're all so used to seeing it be greater than the pot size. And he not only folds this very strong hand, but he shows it to the 3-better, who happened to be his buddy, and now the whole table gets to see that he did that. Now, it's possible he was folding that to avoid tangoing with his buddy, and if so, that's sort of like collusion, kind of. But either way, all right. But oh my fucking god, I wanted to scream, what is with these fucking people? Why can't they just fold their cards? What is so almighty difficult about just throwing their cards in? Why do they have to make this whole show about it? Why do they have to pick them up and expose them? And I don't want to hear, well, maybe he just didn't know, it just wasn't heads up, because how do you not know who's in the fucking pot? The small blind or the button, whatever it was like 2 seats away from him, and he called the 30. The chips were right fucking in front of him. And his cards. I mean, this shit is just so unbelievable and unbearable sometimes. A child would know better. Anyway, back to Friday night. Don't want to waste any more time in getting to the next points of sage-like wisdom. So the game was full for a little while, and then whoever was in the 1 seed left, and someone took his place. And then the guy who said having the 7-4 offsuit exposed killed my action, he asked the table, he's like, what happened to the guy in the 1 seed? Did he leave? I said, no, he didn't leave. He's hiding under the table. And the table laughed. Now, look, I guess I ask stupid questions like that sometimes, too, where the answer is quite obvious. So obvious that you're essentially lobbing a hanging curveball and inviting someone to make a smart-ass remark. I mean, it was no big deal, but sometimes it's just like, buddy, if he didn't leave this game, which is still full, as you can see, then how else would you explain his absence? So, I was there until about 2:30 in the morning. It was around that time he said, I'm so tired I'm getting delusional. I said, I think you mean delirious. He said, yes, that's what I meant. And then I finally asked where he's from, and he said Florida. I thought, okay, That explains a lot. And I'll explain even more in the next episode when I get to the hand histories. But it also explains a lot more for right now as well. Because here was the highlight comment he made. And this is the densest thing I've heard in weeks. And you know that that's saying a lot. Maybe even the densest thing I've heard in months or years. I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that. But he played a hand with someone where he had something big on the river. He was bet into. But he only called. And he won. Even though his hand was certainly more than good enough to raise. Even though I don't remember what it was. But we see this all the time at 2-5. Even from pros. But the hardest thing to listen to, I think in any context, at least at a poker game, and probably anywhere, is when someone is trying really hard to sound like they know what they're talking about, but could not have any less of an idea. And that, of course, is so much what the pool at 2-5 is like, that it drove me into doing this podcast. So he wins his hand, people are commenting on it, and he was like, yeah, he's like, but where are the implied odds for raising? Where are the implied odds for raising? It's the kind of question that just makes you bury your hands in your face, especially when you're getting your ass kicked in this game like I was. I was getting smoked in a game where we were all straddling for hours and had people declaring that they had no implied odds for raising. Okay. I know most of the listeners probably don't need this clarification, but just in case there's anyone who does, let's go over some Poker 101 here. Implied odds. What are implied odds? Well, suppose a pot has $100 in it and someone bets $100 into you. Now the pot has $200. 100 plus 100 equals 200. So if you have to call $100 to win $200, you are getting 2-to-1 on your money to call, and these 2-to-1 odds are known as the expressed odds, since you are guaranteed to win $200 as that money is already in the pot. That is why it is called the expressed odds. But if you think you can win the additional, say, $400 your opponent still has if your hand improves, those $400 are referred to as implied odds. Money that's not currently in the pot, but that you anticipate will be, or at least could be. So he took this commonly understood and applied poker term known as implied odds, something that is extremely basic in factoring into making a decision, and completely and utterly misused what this term meant in an effort to take a license and show everyone how savvy he is. Except he sincerely had absolutely no idea what the hell he was talking about. Where's the implied odds by racing the river? This is why this shit is so fucking insufferable. I'll tell you where the implied odds are, dear fellow. They are in the marsh, with all the Florida Everglade alligators and all the rest of the other swamp-residing organisms and what few functional brain cells you somehow still have. Spoken like a true Floridian poker player, eh? Where's the implied odds by raising the river? Can't get this anywhere else. We will never see it all. I swear, I did not mishear a word at all. This is exactly what he said. But all right, that'll wrap up this week's expert commentary and questions. Got a bunch of hand histories to get to in the next show, most of which were total disasters. And I must say, I cannot wait to relive them all. And so much that I think I need a day or 2 or 3 from playing again. Cool. We'll talk soon.